So you're here at this video because you've just realized that there's probably a few things that aren't so perfect about your renovation plans. Specifically, you've run through the renovation ready plan stress test, and that has really thrown up some insights for you about where things might be lacking. Now, if you haven't done this plan stress test, that's fine. There's a link in the description. What it's going to do is it's going to take you through 31 questions, which are really designed to uncover where there's any issues with your plans before you commit to them. I think it's so important that we take that time to really analyze the plans that we're about to spend like so much money on, so much time and so much effort, because once we get going, it's much harder to change them. But while they're just lines on paper, it's brilliant. We've got all the power. So really worth taking that time now. So if you've come back to watch this video after completing the test, then brilliant. I think you're in a much, much stronger position than when you started, because the key thing now is that you know where your plans are falling down. It's not just that kind of nagging feeling that is like, just not quite sure that we're ready to commit to these plans, but now you know why. Now you've got that insight. So that's brilliant. So in this video, what I want to do is just go over for you, what are the next steps? Like, what are my options now? Now that I know there's some gaps, now that I know specifically what they are, what should I do? So I want to talk about a broader view of that, and then I'll go specifically through each of the main sections and talk to you about what we can do with each of those. So I think the first point to note is let's not get caught up in this idea of perfection. There'll never be a perfect set of plans. There'll never be a perfect resolution. There'll just be something that's close enough that you feel confident to commit to it and that feels right for you and that you'll feel excited enough to press forward with. Now, I think the place you should probably start is to really look at what you've discovered by doing the test and think, okay, so are we fundamentally having to rethink this design? Because sometimes it's best to work with what you've got. It's best to just build and layer and tweak and move things around. But other times it's actually better to just start with a clean sheet of paper. So that's a key decision that you need to make. Are we working with what we've got, or are we starting again? But don't think of it as like, oh, we're stepping backwards, we're having to start again, because you're not stepping backwards and working from the same place where you were back then. You're starting from a much, much higher level where you've got a much better idea of what you're wanting, what you're not wanting, what you're going to demand from these plans and the process to get there. So you're in a much, much stronger position now than you were before. You've got all of that learning, all of that insight. So don't feel bad if that is your decision to start again. Just think, brilliant. It gives you the opportunity from a fresh sheet of paper to really build exactly what you're wanting this time. So then I think another really important decision in all of this is, who do I work with going forward? So you've had somebody that you've been working with to get to this set of plans, or possibly you've inherited them. So that person, you might not even know them. So that's a different thing. You might not have an active designer right now, but probably more than likely you've got someone you're working with. Yeah. So I would always say that as much as you can, just continue to work with that person. I think architects and designers, we need help from you. We need a clear brief. We need to understand what's not working for you. So the more clarity and feedback that you can give to a designer, the better. Yeah, it's going to really, really help them. So if you can go back to your current designer and you can be really clear about, well, these are the areas where I feel that we need to develop this scheme, they're going to be happy because you're giving them a really clear brief that they can respond to. So I would say most of the time it's going to be great to just go back and continue that conversation and that dialogue and that creative process with your current designer. Now, at the same time, there is sometimes a realization that we need to get to where we think, the person we're working with has just not got what we need. Yeah. So sometimes I think of it a little bit like, you wouldn't go to a tailor for a wedding dress. a tailor can be brilliant at certain things, at suits and tailoring, yeah, but you wouldn't go to them for your wedding dress. So you have to think about right fit. It's not necessarily saying that your current designer is is not a great designer. It's just that maybe for what you're missing and what you need, they might not be the best fit. So if that's the case, one of the things you can do is you can do something I call layering expertise. So for example, you might use an architect to create the shell of your project. And technically they're going to do all the right things in terms of foundations and external detailing and roof levels and all of that kind of thing. Architects can be brilliant at that. And so you might get the shell done by them, but then you might look for somebody different who has a better understanding of how you're going to live in the space and the layering on of interiors and all of that kind of thing to do the internal space. So think about, is my designer the best designer to continue with? Do they have what I now need? Now I know what I need, am I confident that they can deliver? Or do I need to be layering on more expertise over the top? Or do I need to be starting again? But this time I will know exactly what I'm wanting from a designer. And when you're interviewing designers, when you're talking to different people, you can ask questions now with confidence and you can feel empowered because you can ask them, will you do this? Will you be looking at this in the designs? Are these the type of things you're going to be considering when you're putting the design together? And that's going to really help you to choose the right person so that you end up with a really good design at the end that you feel confident in. So once again, I would say, don't be discouraged. Renovation isn't necessarily easy, but what I know from you now is because you're here and because you're listening to this, you want to get this right. You want to invest well and you want to create something that really works for you and your family. Please just realize that getting the plans right is such a huge investment in the overall renovation itself. The time and effort you put into this is setting the very foundation of everything else going very well. Because if you build poor plans, no matter what beautiful fixtures, fittings, materials, and furniture you put onto that at the end, it's never really going to work. So you're doing the right thing by investing your time and energy into getting these drawings right. And I'd also say, just remember, you're not going for perfection, because I do see that with people. I see people going round and round and round and round, unable to commit to a final plan that's actually good enough. So don't get caught in that perfection trap. What you want to do is just get to a point where the plans are ticking enough boxes and you're feeling confident in those plans, you're feeling excited about those plans, and you're ready to commit to them. So let's talk a bit more now about the individual sections where your plans may be falling down. So the first of the sections is, do the plans work for you in your life? Now, this is a pretty fundamental thing, and often I see plans failing here because you've inherited them, or I see plans failing here because sometimes a design and build company or those types of people, they just give a very standard solution to everybody. So it's not in response to how you live. It's very much in response to what they build, which is often, it might just be a typical loft conversion or a very standard box at the back of the house. Yeah. So I would say, if you're stuck on this and you've got plans that don't really reflect how you live, the most important thing you can do here is you can sit down and you can decide what you really need. So think about your life, think about how you will use the house, how you want to use the house, not necessarily how you use your current house, but how you will want to use this house once it's done. And just think about different times of day, different times of year, different people coming in and out, different scenarios. So really get into that and just make it clear the different spaces you need, the different priorities, so you know what needs to be designed. Now, it may be that your current plans can flex to this, but this is often a time where you probably might need to just start from a fresh sheet of paper and give yourself that opportunity to really think differently about this. So the next section was all about maximizing the property itself. So this is like, imagine you're not living in it. Just imagine it's at the house itself. And are you maximizing what's amazing about it? Are you minimizing what's not so great about it? Are you considering things like sun and views and all that type of thing? So if you're stuck here and you feel your plans don't really do this, the most important thing you can do is you can get really, really clear about what is great about the house, what is not so great about the house. What do I notice about the sun in the house? You know, where does it hit at different times of years? This is brilliant if you've been living in the house for a while. But if you haven't been living in the house, there's amazing apps out there now that can track the sun and show you where it will be at different times of the year. So it's really worth looking into those. But sun and views, where are the views that I absolutely love? Like in my own home, after living here for a few months, I very quickly decided the view that I wanted to see when I woke up in the morning. And that changed the entire layout of my top floor because I really wanted that view. So you're going to know all those things intimately. Where your designer won't. Your architectural designer, they don't live there. So I would really get clear about them, write them all down on a piece of paper. What's great about the house? What's not so great about the house? So what do we want to maximize, minimize? What about the sun? What about the views? So, and take those back to the designer and say, how do we build this into our drawings? You know, maybe you need to move some windows. Maybe you need to do some screening. You know, there's all sorts of different solutions. And if you can take the raw material to your designer, if you've got a good designer, they should be able to come up with solutions for those things. Now, another really important part of this section is, are we adding the right spaces to the right parts of the house? Now, one thing I see over and over again is people maxing out their houses, pushing out in this direction, pushing out in that direction. But all space is not created equal. But all space costs money. So it's really important to think, do I really need all that space? Does that actually make the room work harder, or does it make it actually more tricky to furnish? And sometimes it's better to add little bits of space here, little bits of space here. So it's like, where do I actually need the space? Please just don't build space for the sake of space. It's wasteful, and it's actually going to work against the proper functioning of the house. So really think that through. The spaces that the designer or the architect has recommended you build, have they been really carefully thought through? And you're never going to know that without them being furnished. You're going to have to see the furniture laid out in those spaces so you can understand, does that space deserve to be part of the scheme, or is it just there because it's space? And, you know, there's this idea that, you know, more space is good space. More space is not necessarily better. Sometimes less space is better. So the next section, which is, have the plans been properly explored and tested, is a little bit different from the actual kind of plans themselves. This is more around the process around the plans. And one of the key things I see over and over again is people are given one solution and you are asked to kind of say yes or no, or oh, maybe we want to do some tweaks to this one solution. Now, a real belief of mine is that until we've explored a number of solutions, how do we know that the final solution is the one that is the right solution? So I would always say it is very, very worth with your designer, just very roughly, we're not talking about detailed plans, but very roughly looking at how else could we do this? So if your designer's given you one solution, I would go back to them and I'd say, okay, well, maybe that's the right solution, but could we just like play around? I'd like to see, 3 or 4 different ways we could do this, just at a sketch level, just so I can feel confident that the one that we're choosing is the right one going forward. Now, the other thing you need to think about in this area is you need to think about budget. And I see all the time people taking some drawings and thinking, yes, this is our build, and going to planning permission, getting building regulations, structural calculations, and then getting it priced, and then going, oh my God, that's a lot of money. Is that really what we want to spend? But there's this all the sunk cost that you put into all the drawings. And, I've made this mistake myself, many years ago when I started renovating. I've been in the exact position where you've got this bundle of detailed design work, and you've paid architects and structural engineers and everything. And it's just like, it comes in so expensive. But by that stage, you're kind of thinking, well, I've invested in this now. So what I say is very, very early on, get a rough ballpark price for your drawings and make sure that they are going to be in the ballpark of what you want to spend. And then if you decide, no, that's not quite right, you haven't invested a lot of money, time, and energy in those drawings. So do that early on. So if you haven't done that with your drawings, and if budget is a deal for you, you know, there are some people in the world where it's not a big deal. If that's you, brilliant, great. So just press on with whatever you want. But just think about that. And I always say to my clients at the same time, when you're thinking about investment, think about return. Yeah. So I have had clients before where the ballpark pricing came back high, but at the same time, because I suggested it would be a good idea, they went and talked to some local real estate agents about the uplift that the designs would have on the property. And they got such positive feedback in terms of the uplift that those plans would deliver, that they decided it would be crazy not to execute those plans, even though they were different from the initial budget. You need those two pieces of information quite early on, I would suggest, to just give you an idea of is this a sound investment going forward. Do that when you're at concept level, where you haven't invested in all the detailed drawings. And that is another point where it comes in with this idea of alternatives, because what you might want to do is you might want to do that with a few different alternatives. Sometimes I suggest to clients that we start out with a very basic kind of obvious and simple solution, and that might be solution A, but then there might be a more ambitious solution that they're excited about and it's stretching. And I say, well, let's just ballpark price two or three options and let's get some feedback from some estate agents and people in the property game about the kind of the uplift that we could expect. And then you've got all that information and you can start to then make some really, really intelligent decisions about what you're going to do strategically with your property. So what's also covered in this area is the planning and building regulations and, you know, are you in an area of outstanding natural beauty? Do you have a listed building? Now, if you've got a good designer or architect, they're going to take care of all of that stuff for you. But if you're designing it yourself, just don't forget that those things need to be considered. You can't necessarily push out a rear extension as far as you want to go. There's a lot of information from the planning portal online where it guides you on what you can do and what you can't do. But a good designer is going to cover all of that off. The next section is about, is the actual approach to the design appropriate for us? Doesn't mean it's good or it's bad. It just means, is it right for us and our project? And that's in terms really of ambition and scale and level of detailing. When it comes to moving forward, if this is an area where your plans have failed, then you might have to start thinking here about working with a different designer, because certain design routes are going to provide you with certain levels of ambition and detailing. So for example, if you've gone down the design and build route, you might be finding that the plans aren't ambitious enough or detailed enough for you. You might want something that's just a little bit more special than just a kind of standard extension or a standard loft. And I would say that if that's where you're at, it's unlikely that going back to those people are going to provide you with what you want. You might need to find a designer who is going to give you that bit extra. Or the other thing is this, where you can start to layer that expertise. You might go, okay, well, I've got a standard kind of box type extension. I've got a pretty standard design. Maybe I can start to work with somebody who can help me to make it special inside. So layering that expertise and working with somebody specifically on the finer detailing and adding that kind of specialness into the property can really, really work. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes I see people who want quite simple homes that just function well and are special, but they don't really want an architectural masterpiece. And I see them working with architects who are brilliant architects, but they are the type of architects who want to play with interesting materials and detailing, and they get very specific and focused about some very beautiful details, but the average homeowner is just not going to appreciate those. So you might find that you've got that kind of relationship going on. Your architect is trying to create this masterpiece, and you're going, actually, I just want a nice house. I want a nice home to live in. I don't really need custom carved finials, and I don't really need that very, very expensive roof detailing. I just want a nice house. So, once again, that can be a difficult relationship if you're in it. It might be that the architect can definitely dial back, but they may not be happy about it because, sometimes it is difficult if you've got a vision for something and you care about making it really, really beautiful, and then that relationship doesn't quite support that. So it may be that you need to take those drawings and you need to work with somebody who's perhaps a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more straightforward. So the next section was all about, have the plans been properly tested for everyday living? Now, if your plans have fallen down here, it's because they're probably not showing enough detail and enough solutions for all the just the general stuff of life. Where do you put your keys, and where are you going to put muddy football boots? So this is really something where it's about adding in detail. And the number one piece of detail that needs to be added is furniture. I say that you cannot assess a set of plans without furniture being involved. You just won't know whether the rooms are going to flow, whether they're going to connect well, if you've got enough space or not enough space. So I really think it's important that your plans are furnished. So go back to your designer and say, I want these plans furnished. And if you've got specific pieces of furniture that you want to fit into your new home, give them the dimensions. Like, put your real furniture in them. Don't just do it as a sort of theoretical thing. Think about your furniture and where it's going to go, and start to make the plans really come alive in terms of how you're going to live in that space. And then if your plans don't do it already, you're going to want to start having conversations with your designer about resolving really important things. Like, something I see all the time is people want a lot of glass at the back of their property, but they also want a fireplace and they want a TV and they want somewhere to hang out. And you've got all those conflicting focal points. Now, it's really easy to think, oh yeah, we'll sort that out once the house is built. But actually, it can be very, very tricky. And that's where you can end up with rooms that just don't work very well. But if you design those solutions in from the outset, then everything can work so seamlessly and beautifully. So those are the sorts of things you're going to want to see resolved in your plans. And if they're not, then those are really, really good conversations you can be having with your designer, so that those kind of resolutions can be baked into the very plans that you're going to approve. So one of the things I would suggest that you do at this point, if you're not happy with your plans, is that you just create a big list for yourself of all the things that irk you about your current living situation. So for me, I'd be writing down, oh, I hate having the washing drying where I can see it, or oh, I never know where my keys are going to be, or I've got all this kind of bulk kind of cat litter, dog food, all my bulk stuff. Or, oh, I have a particular way that I deal with hanging up my gym gear at the end of the day. I want that dealt with. So what are all those little micro things in life that a house can really support us with? But if they haven't been thought through, it can really fail to deliver. Even the grandest renovations, where hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds have been spent, and the house can look beautiful in a magazine, but it can fail on those little tests of just making the house function well. So if your plans don't reflect how they're going to solve those issues, make sure you've got a really clear list of issues that you understand that you want solved, and take those back to your designer. And then the final section that possibly your plans may have failed on is, do they have a spark? Is there something about these plans that is just like special and new? And really importantly, something that you're going to value. So, for example, for me, my last house, one of the things I really, really wanted was a sofa in the sun where I could lie and read a book. So, one of my rooms was, well, actually, a lot of the floor plan of the ground floor was designed around that. I knew where the sun was going to hit. And I was like, that's it. That's the sofa position. And it happened to be where the kitchen was. So everything needed to get changed because that was my thing. and it was one of my favorite places in the house, and I loved it. And that was like my thing that I was so looking forward to, having that special place where I could sit in the sun and lie down and read my book and occasionally have a little afternoon nap. So you're going to be putting a lot of money and energy and effort into this. And I really want for you to have little things baked into those plans that just make your heart sing. Yeah. So maybe it's a little window seat in the kitchen, or like mine, maybe it was a sofa in the sun, or maybe you've always wanted, a lovely wood burning stove, or maybe it's that walk-in dressing area where you can have all your clothes on display, or a beautiful library wall where you've got all your books. They don't have to be expensive things. They don't have to be grand gestures, but just things that make you feel this renovation's mine. This house is going to feel right for us. And I'm really, really excited about moving the project forward. So if you don't have those things in your plans already, then I think it's because it's very personal. What I would do is I would use stimulus. Now, I love using stimulus for all sorts of things, but for this specifically, I would get onto the internet, get onto Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, and just start looking. Don't be looking for style necessarily or to copy a whole room. Just start looking for things that are exciting and things that you might want in your house. And just collect those things. Take a screenshot here and throw them in a little scrapbook and share them with your designer and say, these are the types of things that I would love to have in my home. Now, the other thing you could do is, if you've got a good designer, you can go back to that designer and you can go give me some ideas. What kinds of things might I want in my house? Because sometimes you're not going to know until you've been shown things. So what I like to do with my clients is, when I present drawings to them and options for them, I love to present to them lots of little ideas, make the house that much more exciting and personal and unique to them. Most people do see 3 or 4 different ideas and go, oh, wow, I'd love that. I'd love that reading nook on the landing lined with books, or I'd love that window seat in the kitchen, or that indoor outdoor bar where I can stand at the sink and people can be at a bar stool outside with the worktop going through. I love showing those to people because it just means that we can start to make the plan something that they're genuinely excited about. So stimulus, look for stimulus, ask for stimulus, and make sure that some of the ideas that you get excited about get included in your plans. So there we have it. That's my advice going forward. What I want for you is, I want you to get to a point where you're confident to commit to your plans, that all of the different areas have been checked off to a point where you think, I'm ready to go ahead, feeling super confident and really excited about the renovations that's to come. For me, I think renovating is amazing. Like, how often do we get to create something that's as important as our homes, and we get to do it in the way that we want to do it. We get to choose all the things that are going to be around us and how the house is going to work. And it's such an amazing opportunity.